What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Lineman Life, the podcast. And today we are going to be talking about a number of different avenues, or we're going to be talking about a number of different topics regarding Week 13 in the NFL. I am Uche Nwaneri. This is my podcast. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to all. Just want to kind of start this off. I'm sure most people saw what happened last night in Houston with the New England Patriots taking on the Houston Texans. We are witnessing, in my opinion, the fall of a dynasty. I think that in this season in particular, we have seen what a New England Patriots team looks like when they don't have players like Gronk, when they don't have that safety net on offense, and Tom Brady doesn't have that reliable receiver that he can throw it to. And make no mistake, in the past, it has been Gronkowski, it's been Aaron Hernandez. It's that tight end position has been a vital position for the New England Patriots for many years now. And we are watching a New England offense that has stumbled out of the gates, a New England offense that has not found its identity throughout the course of the season. And now heading into December, heading into the money month of football, we are witnessing the New England Patriots offense as the liability rather than as the asset. And that defense that they have has held as long as they could. But sooner or later, when you're exposed for as long as they're exposed, it's going to be a situation where you're now being stretched too thin, and that defense has been stretched pretty thin over the last few weeks, and now they're seeing the cracks and the chinks and the breaks start to show themselves. But definitely, last night in Houston was a bit of a turning point, I think, for the Patriots. And look, I've played against the Patriots a number of times. This is the least efficient I've ever seen the Patriots on offense. It's always hard to play against the Patriots because it doesn't matter how good your defense is. Every defense is liable to give up yardage and give up points based on the amount of based on their exposure on the field. And in my years going against the Patriots, it's so hard. It was so hard to get that offense off the field just because they're so efficient. Brady put the ball wherever he wanted. It was hard to get incompletions. Teams didn't really bother to blitz Brady much because, Brady has the ability to get the ball out quick. He gets the ball out fast. And on one end, you look at their defense and you say, okay, well, if we can turn it into a track race, we can turn it into a scoring match, then, we have a chance. But their defense has always picked and choose their spots to be a dominant defense throughout the years. And this year, for them, they've had the luxury of having a defense that can shut out offenses and get offenses off the field in 3 plays and get their offense back on the field. But, it's weird like that because you can have a dominant defense and the offense struggles mightily and it all balances itself out. And, just really has not been what they've hoped for. And I think you could see a lot of that frustration on Tom Brady's face last night. As I watched the game, and I'm sure this will turn into a meme of sorts in the NFL annals of time. Tom Brady is sitting on the bench with his offensive coordinator. They're looking at plays on the tablets, and you see Tom Brady make that gun motion up to the air, which was clearly a sign or a signal that he gave to his receiver on the outside. That he made to receivers on the outside in regards to what route he was supposed to run on that play. They run that play, Tom Brady, and it's clear that Tom Brady and his receiver were not on the same page because he ran a different route Tom Brady threw the ball to nobody, incomplete. They get to the sideline, and you can kind of see in how he's speaking that he's had enough, that he was just totally dejected, disgusted with how the offense has performed. And, that is the first sign that I have probably seen in his entire career since his first Super Bowl. That's probably the first time I've ever seen Brady look as if he's given up on his offense. And I think that if I read his lips correctly, he did say something along the lines of I'm finished with them, or I'm finished with it, something like that. So definitely not a good situation out there in New England. But again, it reminds me of my 2000 and what was that? That would have been 2009 season, 2010 season in Jacksonville, when we had we just came off having, one of the top defenses in the league. And for whatever reason, we had just signed a couple of big names. We signed Drayton Florence. We signed Jerry Porter, gave those guys some big money to come to Jacksonville to help us get over that hump. And man, it was pretty ugly that entire year, watching our defense get scorched by every quarterback in the NFL. Every quarterback that came into Jacksonville Stadium, every quarterback that came into what was at the time Everbank Stadium, you would just watch them light the scoreboard up against our defense. And it didn't make any sense, because we had a defense that was in the top 10 the previous season. And we had a defense that featured new players that were bringing what was supposed to be more talent, what was supposed to be more energy to our defense. And it got ugly quick, and it stayed ugly often. I'll never forget the Monday night game against the Indianapolis Colts, and Peyton Manning it was a double move. It was double move city all game long. Double move, touchdown. Double move, touchdown against our defensive secondary. And, it just was a complete disaster. And I think, on one end, our offense was working well, but we're not a team that was going to score 40 points in a game. But we could drop 21-28. We just need a couple stops from the D. I think what you're seeing with the Patriots is kind of the flip of that. You're seeing a defense that can run with the best of them, but an offense that can't seem to get out of its own way, an offense that can't seem to execute, and it is holding the entire team back. Now, at this point in the season, I don't think there's much of anything that they can do about it. Maybe if they had Antonio Clown, they might have a chance. Maybe if they didn't get rid of Josh Gordon, they might have a chance. Those were moves that they made on the offensive side that, to me, didn't make much sense. How do you get rid of a receiver who, at his height, was considered among, the top 3, top 5 wide receivers in the NFL? He had his little hiatus, his little exiling from the NFL because of issues off the field. He comes back, and you don't help nurse this guy back into a role that can see him regain that premier level of play that he was providing before his exile. And you let him go. You let him walk. He's not even hurt, and you let him walk. And now you have a situation where you don't have any offensive weapons. And this is not going to be the year where Tom just makes all these no-name guys look like superstars. So very big problem for the Patriots, obviously. And look, we're talking about a team that's 10-2. It's 10-2, but by the way that we're looking at it, you would think that they were, that they were 2-10. But we'll see how it plays out for them. Obviously, they lost that first place seeding to Baltimore yesterday in that loss. So they may be looking at playing an away game in their first playoff game once the postseason hits. But it is December 2nd. We are in the final stretch for the postseason. This is where all the positioning and seeding is going to be set. This is where those few teams that sneak in at the very end are going to have their opportunity to sneak in. And You look at what's going on with a lot of these teams that are there, especially when you look at the NFC East and what's going on over in Dallas and over in Philadelphia. These guys are are going nowhere fast, but somehow still in the thick of things. You have a Cowboys team that's what, 6-6 now? Cowboys team that's 6-6, and an Eagles team that just lost to the Miami Dolphins. And that, has got to be crushing. To lose to a team like that, and I know how that is. And it's crazy. I have a story for everything here. I know how that is. To have a team that has barely, that hasn't really done much of anything. The team that we were talking about at the beginning of the season that was going to be tanking to get that first pick and that first overall pick in the draft. And right now, they come out in what is a huge must-win game for the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Eagles drop the ball, lose the game, and it's pretty much a neck and neck race now in the NFC East. It's probably going to come down to Dallas playing the Eagles at the end of the season to get into the playoffs. And, things are just really ugly in the NFC East. But, I do have a story about that as well. We'll get to that maybe in a moment. But let's take a look here at, let's see. Let's take a look here at some of the headlines coming out of Bleacher Report. Patriots and Brady are failing each other. We already know about that. We've seen a lot of the things that were going on in that game. So not really something that we need to really rehash. A lot of the post-mortem of Week 13. Cleveland. I see one of you guys asked about Cleveland in the comment section here. Cleveland is who we thought they were. Overhyped machine, a team that's been overhyped, a team that has not been able to get any kind of real chemistry throughout the course of the season. And I think that really falls back on the fact that you have a coach that is a first-year head coach in the NFL, guy who has no experience, a guy who probably shouldn't have gotten the job. I would have never given a guy like that the job as the head coach. Again, like I say, this league is a league for men. This league is a league that is built on precision, built on efficiency. And when you have a guy like Odell Beckham Jr., who over the last 6 games has 1 touchdown catch and has averaged about 4 catches a game, nowhere near 100 yards, things will get ugly. And I am surprised that he has held his composure up to this point. I did a video a few weeks back just counting down until that bomb explodes, until he, finally releases the hounds on the Cleveland Browns organization, because, this is not the Odell that we are accustomed to seeing in regards to how he maintains his composure. And definitely not a situation that I'm sure he is happy with. And to be honest, I don't think he wants to be there. Honestly, I don't think he wants to be there. I don't think he wants to be a part of that team. I don't think he wants anything to do with that franchise. Based on what he's seen, based on how they've played, I can't blame him. Can't blame him at all. But definitely there are issues there in Cleveland. Let's keep going on here. And of course, another part of the Week 13 madness is the Baltimore Ravens and their huge win over San Francisco 49ers. Now, look, I grew up a 49ers fan. As a kid, loved Steve Young, my favorite player of all time in the NFL. Loved those throwback uniforms in that 94 season when they finally got over the hump and beat those Dallas Cowboys, who had been beating them each and every year in the NFC title game. and got that Super Bowl trophy and got that monkey off of Steve Young's back. And fast forward, 20 years later, 20, 24, 25 years later, and the 49ers haven't had much to talk about. But yesterday's game was huge for both teams. Obviously, it's all about seeding at this point. Baltimore needed that seeding to keep themselves in the race for the number one seed in the AFC, and San Fran obviously is wanting to hold their number one seeding in the NFC. But huge game, came down to a last-second kick as time expired, and these Ravens are just a great, exciting team to watch right now. I think with Lamar Jackson and what he's done, he has all but sewed up that MVP crown. I firmly believe he is the front runner by a long shot for the MVP status. And it's really boiling down to the fact that we may have just witnessed the preview of the Super Bowl with these two squads playing it out. And if the Super Bowl is anything like the game they played yesterday, then it will break all kinds of ratings records, because that was one hell of a game. For me, I look at it and I say, as long as these teams stay on their path, there's still a lot of football left to be played. I mean, we're in the last month. December is a huge month. We're in the last month of it. As long as they can keep up their keep their trajectory going upward, then I don't see a situation where, any teams can really catch up with these two guys. Let's take a look here at some of the comments in the comment section. Let's see. We got Soki1. Oh, wait. Soki1 says, Uche play all interior positions. He also could have potentially ran the entire route tree, including the skinny post, which would have been hilarious. Now, my skinny post skills are the stuff of legend. Not going to lie. When I run my skinny posts, safeties are backpedaling hard because they know what's coming at them. Freight train of African athleticism and determination, and I'm coming down with that ball. A lot of people don't know this, but when I was in middle school, I played tight end and defensive end. When I was in high school, I was a second-team All-State defensive end, and that's what I got my scholarship to Purdue as a defensive end. And in that time, it's crazy. And it's a little bit of story time right now. So let me just kind of let me indulge in this for a second. Coming out of high school, and I went to Naaman Forest High School in Garland, Texas. Shout out to Naaman Forest. In high school, I got my scholarship to go to Purdue as a defensive end. So for me, I didn't really understand the value of training and kind of maintaining your physical shape coming out of high school. So when I got that scholarship as a defensive end, I weighed about 235, 245 pounds at D end. And in that summer, between finishing at Naaman Forest and going to Purdue University, probably gained about 30 pounds, 35 pounds. I got to Purdue my freshman year, jumped on that scale, and I think I weighed around 270, 275. And it's funny, when I got off that scale, there were a few guys looking at me like, O-line, you're going to be an O-lineman. I'm like, oh, whoa. Old Uche is not playing no O-line. Uche came here as a top-ranked defensive end out of the state of Texas. Ain't no change in my position. Ain't none of that going to happen. But needless to say, about 2 years later, no, not even 2 years later, going into my second year at Purdue during spring workouts, and I dropped probably about 10, 12 pounds by that time. So I was sitting around 260. What was I at? I was sitting around 268, 269, something like that. And one of the offensive linemen One of the offensive linemen actually broke his foot during stretch. Broke his foot during stretch. I mean, how unbelievable is that? This guy breaks his foot during stretch, and now all of a sudden, I was actually playing defensive end and defensive tackle at that time. So during our one-on-one pass rush portion of practice, offensive line coach comes over to me and says, hey, Uche, come over here. And I'm like, whoa, what the hell is going on here? He says, let me see you get in a 3-point stance. And I just gave him that look like, serious? 3-point stance? All right. Get in the 3-point stance. Do a couple of get-offs. And at this point, I'm starting to get that sinking feeling in the bottom of my stomach. And I'm just thinking to myself, this guy is seriously making me run some offensive line drills right now. So after that practice, I get called into the defensive ends. Our defensive end coach calls me in. Gary Emanuel, who also coached in the NFL for a number of years. Love Gary, love Coach E-Man. Great dude, East Coast raised. So he shoots to see you straight. Sit in his office. He looks at me, straight in my eyes, says, Uche, want to talk to you about your future. And at this point, I pretty much know what's coming, but in my head, there's still that glimmer of hope that this guy is not about to turn me into an offensive lineman. So Coach E-Man explains to me, he says it like this. He says, Uche, now, I want you to understand that you could play defensive end here at Purdue, and you could be a starter, and you could be a good defensive end, but you just be a good defensive end. But if you play on the offensive line with your kind of footwork, with your kind of athleticism, you could make millions of dollars. It could change your life. And when he put it to me at the moment, I didn't quite understand it. But, over the next few weeks, talked to my parents, talked to my friends, considered whether I wanted to transfer out of Purdue. At the end of the day, my parents said these coaches are doing it because they see something in you that they can use and they can optimize at a higher level than what you are currently being used at. So for me, I embraced it. It was a hard pill to swallow at first, but I embraced it. And then I figured out that everything that Coach Emanuel was telling me was right. When I switched over to the offensive line, it actually changed my entire perspective on football. It changed my entire perspective on, what it means to be a football player. I was able to do things in ways that other offensive linemen couldn't because I was a much better athlete than they were. Had quicker hands than they had quicker feet than they had. The Boilermakers used me routinely as a pulling guard. They would put me out in space, running down linebackers, pulling on power plays. And really, it just, the game became more fun because I think at defensive end at that time, as a young player playing on the defense, I was trying to catch up. Because the way that Purdue played defensive end at that time was different than how I played it as, a player coming out of Texas. The defensive end position was not a linebacker-esque kind of position. The defensive end position was it was a defensive line position. It was a quicker D lineman who still had the weight to hold up in the run, but also had that quickness to get around the edge in the pass. And it became a situation where at Purdue, these defensive ends were 250 pounds, 245 pounds. Sean Phillips, Anthony Spencer. These guys were, running 4.7, 4.6 40s. And I was running a 4.950, which is a step. I was a step slower. And it just was a good opportunity. So for me, I the rest is history. I ended up playing offensive line. And from there, it changed my life. So thanks, Coach E-Man. Appreciate that. But that's just part of my story time there. Just wanted to give you guys a little bit about my past as a player. But let's keep going through this NFL Week 13. Let's look at this Week 13 report card coming out of Week 13. There were a couple of things that were pretty nice to look at, and we'll start. I'm going to start with my team first and foremost. And let's see if I can find them down here. Oh God, Eagles, Dolphins. Here we go. So it's the return of Minshew mania. This is a crazy situation. And, without even having to read any of this, because I saw most of the game yesterday, it's a shame, I think. I think it's a shame for Nick Foles, because Nick Foles is a quarterback who has proven that he has what it takes to lift a team up and to take a team into the postseason and to win a Super Bowl. He's done it. We all know what he's done. We've all seen it. So we know that the guy has a talent. But I'll tell you what. It's something about quarterbacks coming to Jacksonville that just does not ever work. Since David Garrard, we haven't had a quarterback that's been worth a damn. Let's be honest. And truth of the matter is, somebody who played there 7 years and somebody who's seen what I saw David Garrard. Well, when I got there was Byron Leftwich. He got released promptly after I got there. But you had Byron Leftwich, David Garrard, Chad Henne, Blaine Gabbert, Blake Bortles, Nick Foles, and Gardner Minshew. That is the quarterback rotation that the Jaguars have had going back to 2007. And, I don't know what it is. But in regards to the situation right now, the Jaguars, I don't put necessarily this on Nick Foles' back. I don't put the blame on Nick Foles. Why? Because the Jaguars' offensive line is garbage. It is garbage. And when I say it's garbage, I mean it easily could be the worst offensive line in the NFL. Easily. If you watch that game yesterday, by the time Nick Foles got to the back of his drops, he was under instant pressure. Their right tackle, their left tackle, giving up pressure, the middle of the offensive line, giving up depth, pushing the pocket backwards, right into the quarterback on a repeat basis. And it's been like that the entire season. You talk about these plays that Gardner Minshew made. Gardner Minshew made a lot of those plays, a lot of those instinctually amazing plays, because it was the necessity. It was a necessity for him in order to even get a throw off. This guy's having to do pirouettes to get around linemen getting thrown back into him to get the ball off. I mean, it's unbelievable. And let's take a look at this part of this article. The Jacksonville Jaguars chose to replace Gardner Minshew when Nick Foles was healthy enough to be inserted into the lineup. Previously, the Jaguars signed Foles to a 4-year, $88 million free agent deal. We know all of that. In his third start since returning, Foles was benched for Minshew after another slow start. He managed 661 passing yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions and 3 losses over that stretch. Minshew entered Sunday's contest during the second half and threw for 147 yards with a touchdown and an interception. I also know how this goes, Foles told reporters after the 28-11 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jaguars now have a quarterback conundrum. Where does everyone stand regarding Minshew mania taking over as Jacksonville's starting signal caller? These guys look at it and they say turning back to the stash was a must. Foles just hasn't been able to recapture that Super Bowl magic. I read that and I just it just to me it shows how little these guys know about football. Shows how little they know about football. And I'll talk about that here in a second. But let's get through these. He wasn't great, but he was far better than Foles. That's the bigger part of the story of this story. Not what happened to Foles today, but how the Jaguars proceed with Foles and Minshew moving forward. Mike Tanier. The Jaguars are 4-8. He threw an interception at the goal line in garbage time. Stop trying to make this a thing. Minshew wasn't great, but that doesn't really matter since the Jaguars never should have benched him for Foles in the first place. He was certainly better than Foles, and we saw that magic on a couple of occasions, but he still led just one touchdown drive on 6 possessions against a vulnerable pass defense. It's not like Minshew played particularly well against a terrible Tampa pass defense. He just played better than Foles, who was well and truly awful. Now, look, and I've been in those kind of situations where you got a quarterback controversy kind of brewing, and people make comments like this, but let's be real. Nick Foles hadn't had an opportunity to really play this season. He hasn't. Point blank. Hasn't been able to play. Guy's coming off a broken collarbone, and what do they expect for him to do based on how the Jaguar season has gone this year? What do they expect? I mean, I couldn't have expected that this guy was going to come out and just somehow turn the season around. He got knocked out in the first drive of the first game of the season. The guy has not had the opportunity to even develop or get comfortable in the offense as of, yesterday's game. I mean, it was just, his third game back? What, is he supposed to all of a sudden be just ready to turn this into a winning franchise? These guys traded away the best player on the team. Completely detrimental to the defense that they have. And we've watched that defense fall off the cliff since Jalen Ramsey was traded. We've watched that defense utterly implode on itself. They can't stop anything. They are a wet paper towel right now, getting ran straight through. So you think that with everything else that's going on in that franchise, that Nick Foles coming back was going to change anything? I look at what Nick Foles did in the first game of the season in one drive, and for me, that is enough to know that he's the starting quarterback. I don't think that you put in Minshew. I really don't. I don't believe it. They're putting in Minshew for ticket sales. They're putting in Minshew for the excitement that he brings to the franchise. But as a player, there's no comparison. You give both of those quarterbacks time to pass the ball, and you tell me who's a better quarterback. Nick Foles, 10 times out of 10. I think Minshew has potential, absolutely. I think he does have the ability to be a good quarterback. But right now, at this point in the season, all you're doing is creating a bigger problem for the franchise by switching these guys back and forth. You're creating a bigger problem, something that is, it's going to bite them in the ass again, the same way it did when they had Blaine Gabbert drafted in the first round, while you still had a viable and a solid quarterback in David Garrard. And to me, to see how, this franchise mishandles their quarterbacks every time they get a new one, it's disgusting. I think if you look at this Jaguars team and you look at what they've done over the past 5 years, the quarterback position has been in flux regardless of who they've had. And all the Jaguars have done is waste first-round picks on quarterbacks. So now you have a situation where Nick Foles is a Super Bowl MVP quarterback that you've given a ton of money to. And your vote of confidence is to let him play 3 games in the entire season where he doesn't perform on a team that's just not performing at all to begin with. And now you think by making Minshew the quarterback that you're actually helping the franchise. Like Tube Fire says here, you're actually dividing the locker room. You're dividing the locker room because the guys who have been out there, the guys who have been on the field, the guys who have been laying themselves out, they know who the better quarterback is. Now, due to the circumstances, obviously, Nick Foles being injured didn't help the team. But at the end of the day, Gardner Minshew is not the answer to this math equation. You're better off keeping Nick Foles in there, allowing him. You know you're not making it to the playoffs. That's out the window. That's not happening. Let Nick Foles get into some kind of groove as a quarterback. Fix your offensive line. The offensive line that you have paid no attention to over the last 3, 4, 5 years. The offensive line that has one viable starter on it at the center position, where you have nothing but turnstiles at every other position on the field as far as the offensive line is concerned. You've got guys out there who can't protect. Your first round pick should be a left tackle. Your second round pick should be a right tackle. Your third round pick should be a right guard. You know, I say it with some pride because honestly, I don't think the Jaguars have had a good right guard since I played there. I think that's honest to God truth. BJ Cann, just not the guy. I watch him, you know. Somebody mistaked him for me the other day. They said, "Hey, you still in Jacksonville?" I said, "What? I've been retired." They're like, "Damn, there's a guy that looks just like you at right guard. And I know you was right guard." I'm like, "Look, that ain't me. Don't insult me like that again." No, look, you got to understand it's not easy to do what these guys do. As an offensive lineman, I can tell you, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing. But at the end of the day, let's be real about what the real problem is in Jacksonville. It's that their offensive line doesn't give the quarterback enough time to actually read the field. So unless you're just going to do 3-step drops every down, don't expect any quarterback to really look much different than what you saw with Nick Foles. I mean, hell, Minshew still threw an interception. He still threw a pick. And let's not forget that he turned the ball over how many times in London? So it's not the quarterback position. It is your line. Your offensive line is garbage. And until they make the moves necessary to shore up that line, get a couple of free agents, a couple of guys. I mean, look, you're going to have to spend money. You're going to have to sign some guys to some big deals on that line to get some good protection. And then, you may have a chance. But right now, it's just not going to happen with the Jaguars. And to put it on Nick Foles' shoulder with only 3 or 4 games of play time in the entire season, I think that's ludicrous. But let's go through here. Let's look at some teams that matter. Pittsburgh Steelers. I got to say, and again, this is on the exact opposite side of the spectrum. And I may not even talk about this part of this article with regards to the Steelers, but I will talk about the Steelers because as a football player, as a guy who knows the sport, as a guy who understands how these things work from behind the scenes, Pittsburgh Steelers are an example of how a franchise is run at the highest level of efficiency, the highest level of expectations, and the execution that this franchise has had is on the same level of the Baltimore Ravens, same level of New England Patriots, same level of teams like the Niners and the Seahawks. Look, going into week 4, how many people thought for 1 second that the Pittsburgh Steelers had a chance to beat anything this season? Based on the loss of Antonio Brown, based on the loss of Ben Roethlisberger, based on the first, they look like a team that doesn't belong on the field. When you look at that, kind of how their seasons have started in the last 3-4 years, is there any doubt that this is one of the highest class organizations in all of sports? A team that has started the season as woefully as they did to, at this point in the year, be right in the thick of it. This is what I think makes Mike Tomlin the best coach in the NFL. I think it makes him the best coach in the NFL this year. because he took it that had no reason, and nobody would have blamed the Steelers for tanking it this year based on everything that was happening to them to start the season. Nobody would have blamed them for tanking it. I wouldn't have. I would have looked at their situation and said, hey, you know what? Makes sense. Let's try and regroup. Let's try and get ready for let's try and get some good draft picks and get ready to get Big Ben back. Let's get his heir apparent on the roster and start getting him groomed up. And let's get ready to rebuild this thing. Because that's what it looked like. That is what it looked like. People are talking about Mike Tomlin going to that is what the expectation was. And that was after what, week 4 this year? But now look at this team. Look at these Pittsburgh Steelers. I always had a ton of respect for Pittsburgh. Always had a ton of respect for that team. I told my agent going into the last year of my contract in Jacksonville that if these guys let me go into free agency, there are 2 teams I want to play for. San Diego, who are now the LA Chargers, and Pittsburgh Steelers. Those are the 2 teams on my short list. If I got to free agency, that's where these are the 2 spots I want to go to and check them out immediately. Max Starks is one of my good friends off of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Left tackle, right tackle, whatever you want to call him. Max Starks, he won the Game of Thrones against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The only guy I know who got franchise tagged like 5 years in a row. Didn't even start until the playoffs and got a couple Super Bowl rings out of it. I mean, that guy pulled the biggest, best hustle you can on an NFL franchise. He won. But the amount of respect that I have for the Pittsburgh Steelers organization is through the roof. And this is the reason why. It doesn't matter who is on that team. It doesn't matter who is on that roster. These guys are going to play it a certain way all the time. And they have expectations and they have a standard. They set a bar for that franchise. And they hold their players to it regardless of who it is. Mike Tomlin has done it his way. He has done it consistently. And here we are. Here we are in week 14. Let me just pull this up a little bit here. Here we are in week 14. And you got a Pittsburgh Steelers team that started the season off 1-4. That is now sitting at a 7-5 record, second in the AFC North. I mean, let's be serious here, folks. Mike Tomlin deserves to be awarded Coach of the Year. He deserves it. He deserves it. The guy has made, they gave him lemons and he made lemonade. And he made some damn good lemonade. And now he's sitting here with a squad that has an opportunity to get in the playoffs. At the end of the year, going into December, they control their own destiny. What more could you ask for? So again, I say to people who are so quick to say, fire this guy, fire that guy. You know what it's, do you really want to fire a guy like Mike Tomlin? Because you don't know what's coming after. You don't know what's coming after. This is a guy who has coached. This is an organization because it takes more than just one coach. So this coaching staff in Pittsburgh has done what few to maybe no coaching staffs today in the NFL can accomplish. He has guided a team that had no reason or no expectation to be successful, and he guided them to success. He held the fort down. And the Steelers organization, the owners of the Steelers, their front office, they would be fools to let this guy walk. They're not going to let this guy walk. Look at what he did with this team. And that's why they have so much respect from me, because they have done it in a way that they have consistently done it in a way that I don't think any other franchise can do. How many head coaches have they had in their entire team's history? 3, 4? I think three head coaches in their entire team's history. They stick by their coaches because they do it the Steeler way. Just like you look at a team like New England and you say they do it the Patriots way, Pittsburgh is the exact same thing. And, you know, it was actually a point of pride at one point in my career at Jacksonville that ESPN and a lot of the media referred to the Jaguars as the Southern version of the Pittsburgh Steelers, because when we had Jack Del Rio as our head coach, we did it a certain way. We did it a certain way regardless of who it was on the field, regardless of who was injured and who was healthy, and we had success with it. Now, at the end of the day, you know, didn't work out for Jack, but still, in the time that he was there and with the successes that he had, it felt like that kind of organization, felt like a Pittsburgh-like organization. And there was a pride that we all had as players because of that. But again, you know, got to tip my hat to the Pittsburgh Steelers organization for how they have handled themselves, how they have handled the adversity this year. Because when you look at the adversity that they had every reason to pack it up. The schedule wasn't going to be favorable. You know, these guys had a tough schedule throughout the year. Started with New England, then Seattle, then San Francisco, then the Ravens after they beat the Bengals, Chargers, Dolphins, Colts, Rams, Browns, Bengals, Cardinals, Bills. I mean, there's a lot of teams with winning records. A lot of teams with winning records here. Bills winning record. Rams, I believe the Rams have a winning record. Colts winning record. Ravens, Niners, Seahawks, Patriots. These guys played against a strong schedule. And they're sitting at 7-5 behind the number 1 seed, which is Baltimore at 10-2. So, again, hats off to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They made that shit happen. And I ain't mad at them. And anybody who says any different about the ability of Mike Tomlin, the coach, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. Now, let's look at the other side of that coin. Let's flip the coin over here. And again, let's look at these Cleveland Browns. And I'll go through this a little bit because, you know, to be honest, I don't keep up with Cleveland like that. Outside of the huge controversies they've had, don't really care about the Cleveland Browns. Not a team that I ever really followed. And regardless of who they have on their squad, I kind of always looked at them as kind of that bottom barrel, you know, those bottom barrel guys. It says here, Cleveland Browns are a mess, and the team's inability to play with any consistency or discipline is a direct reflection of the head coach. Brady Kitchen has received plenty of flack during the week for his attire, but his team's inability to beat a rival who was down to its third-string quarterback, coupled with injuries to its starting running back and top receiver, basically ended the possibility of a strong finish to Kitchen's first season as head coach. The playoffs are now a distant dream. Is anybody surprised? Is anybody surprised? I'm not. Baker Mayfield and JC's Adventures here says it pretty well. Baker Mayfield is a mere Johnny Manziel 2.0. And I totally believe it. They even look alike to a certain extent. They definitely play similarly. A lot of flash, no substance. They talk a lot, but don't seem to produce much of anything on the field. And you know, they get their rocks off by, you know, pulling wins out of their ass against teams that have no business playing with them in the first place based on talent. But you know, it's crazy. Cleveland Browns 5-7, no chance of going to the playoffs, and they're in total disarray. For the amount of talent they have on that roster, I mean, hell, worst case scenario would have been at least 9-7, 8-8. These guys don't have a chance in hell. Freddie Kitchens couldn't beat a Pittsburgh team that was down to what was essentially their fourth quarterback. You know, they went and signed the guy off the street. This guy was bagging groceries last week, and now he's out here beating the hell out of the Cleveland Browns. But no, you know, this is This is just another example of mismanaging a franchise top down. You know, you give a guy a head coaching job who's never been a head coach, a guy who doesn't have any real experience with setting up game plans and being a leader in a locker room full of men, locker room full of leaders. He doesn't inspire anything in these players for the Cleveland Browns. I think that's obvious when you look at it from the outset. And, you know, you got a quarterback that's a loose cannon. You look at how Baker Mayfield called out Daniel Jones over in New York at the beginning of the season, and that's just total classless garbage. Dude, remember who you play for. You play for the Cleveland Browns. Maybe you should hold off on talking shit until you actually put 3 wins together in a row. Because at the end of the day, I am almost certain that Daniel Jones' career is going to last longer than yours at this point. He's been thrown to the wolves. He has no choice. You've had a couple years to get your shit together, and it's not looking too good. Not looking too good. I want to take a look at this guy's at his statistics for the season. To be honest, let's take a look at it. Let's see where he ranks. I just want to see. Let's go. Let's check this guy out. Baker Mayfield, 2,900 yards passing, not good. Whoa, where's that audio coming from? Come on, ESPN. Stop with the garbage with your automatic playing ads that have audio. Jeez. Anyways, we're looking at Cleveland Browns, Baker Mayfield, 2,900 yards passing, 15 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. A backup would be benched for doing that. A backup would be benched for playing the way that this guy's played. 51.8 QBR, 19th in the NFL. Bottom half. Let's look at his yardage throughout. Let's look at the last what? Let's look at the last 5 games. They got 3 wins. I got the last 5. Then took the L, 27 for 42, 273, and 1 touchdown. Quarterback rating of 90, QBR 46.2. Average. Against Buffalo, they actually won that game 19-16. Threw 2 touchdowns, 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, 6.3 yard average per play. Quarterback rating was better there. Good. QBR 77.3. Pittsburgh win 17 for 32, 192 touchdowns, QBR 74.0, rating at 92. That's what I'm looking at. A lot of inconsistency here. Miami, his highest rating of the last 5 games was against Miami, where he threw 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. But when you look at this guy's entire package, when you look at everything he's done throughout the course of the year, oh my goodness, these guys have got to stop this. I mean, there's got to be some kind of law that says you can't just automatically play videos with audio on ESPN. Jeez Louise. All right. So when you look at this guy's total, everything that goes on for the entire season, this guy's got a quarterback rating of 79.9, QBR 51.8. That's below average, guys. That is below average. This guy is not the kind of quarterback that's going to lead a franchise anywhere. His mouth makes him even less likable. And the fact that they put him in 1 million commercials before the start of the season made him even more unlikable, in my opinion, because he just comes off as a pompous asshole. He comes off as a pompous asshole. There's no, I don't think there's any middle ground there with how he comes off with his personality. You call it passion if you want, Baker. I don't call that passion. Passion is letting your plan do the talk. Passion is letting the numbers do the talking. And you didn't do that. Not by a long shot. You did a lot of talking. And you did a lot of shaving. But you ain't the guy to lead these Cleveland Browns anywhere. Just like Johnny Manziel wasn't the guy to lead the Cleveland Browns anywhere. Just like Tim Couch wasn't the guy to lead the Cleveland Browns anywhere. This guy is not the guy to make anything happen for Cleveland. And with all that talent that you have on that team, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., with all these guys, all this talent, Nick Chubb in the backfield, for you guys to be 5-7, based partly on the leadership you have at head coach and based partly on the mentality of a team that followed the lead of a front runner at quarterback and an inexperienced oaf at head coach, you guys are sitting pretty much where everyone who was looking at this from a realistic perspective figured you'd be. I think that's a fair statement to make. I think it is. I think that you look at what Cleveland has done with Baker Mayfield. They've won against teams that most teams will win against. Now, they beat Pittsburgh, but hey, Pittsburgh, we already had a discussion about how they've been doing this year. That was a team that had every reason to tank and fold. Had every reason to. But at the end of the day, 99% of people are going to choose to be aligned with a franchise like the Steelers over a franchise like Cleveland because of the leadership, because of how that franchise has endured over the course of its lifespan in the NFL as compared to Cleveland. And like Sneaker Pikachu said here, might be time for the Browns to relocate again. Might be time for it. I mean, how are you going to hype up the season next year? How are you going to hype it up? What are you going to say? It's going to have any fans in Cleveland looking forward to coming to that stadium and playing or watching you guys play and make yourselves look the way that you look now? They don't want to see that. That's the last thing they want to see. And it's not going to change so long as Freddie Kitchens is head coach there. But I'm pretty sure that's coming to that experiment's coming into an end at the end of this season. Pretty sure that's going to be over with. Because I don't see any owner of a team that looks at what he's done and looks at the everything on paper and say, hey, we believe in you. I mean, the guy goes out, it's one thing for players to come out, with these messages to the media. Everybody I think everybody knows at this point about the whole Pittsburgh started it t-shirt situation that Freddie Kitchens was running around wearing a shirt that said Pittsburgh started it. Somebody got a selfie with him on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And I mean, are you serious? As a head coach, you really thought that was the appropriate thing to do, to go out in the public wearing a shirt that said Pittsburgh started it? I mean, I think that sums it up. You expect players to maybe do something like that, but not your head coach. Not your head coach. Your head coach has to be above that. Your head coach has to have his eye on the prize. And Cleveland clearly has got their priorities mixed up. Their head coach does not understand that you're supposed to be getting ready for a game. And you're supposed to be getting ready to lead your team into what could be a Hail Mary run for the playoffs, which now has evaporated into nothing more but a wet, airy fart. And we'll be seeing them in the offseason in January out in Vegas. And speaking of Vegas, we got those Showtime boys from Oakland. They're getting ready to make their move. And you know what? They may have got stomped out yesterday. And David Carr may not be the guy They're in Oakland, but I'll tell you one thing. Those guys surprised the hell out of me with how they played this year. These guys overachieved. These guys have played a very respectable year of football in Oakland. And I'm rooting for the Raiders. I'm rooting for the Raiders because these guys were humiliated to start the season. These guys were assumed to be the laughing stock of the league after their situation with one Antonio Clown. And truth be told, I honestly didn't believe that that John Gruden still has it. I didn't believe he still has it. But he's proven me wrong. The guy is a motivator. The guy is a motivator. He kept his team focused on playing ball through all of the garbage, through all of the BS, kept those guys focused on playing football. And they have some fruits to enjoy because of it. Now, I'm not saying that these guys are going to lock in a postseason spot, but these guys have performed admirably, all things considered. And I really believe that when you look at their situation, these guys are set up pretty nicely moving forward. They're going to have an opportunity to build this team up into something that is going to be a force to be reckoned with out in the AFC West. And I think a lot of that can be, directly attributed to what John Gruden's done with that team, what John Gruden and Mike Mayock have done. But obviously, John Gruden gets it. He gets it. He gets it, and he is going to continue to build a team that is going to be a formidable opponent in the years to come, because that's what he does. That's what he's done. Not with Tampa, because I was a big fan of that 2002 Tampa team that won that Super Bowl. That was my freshman year in college. I watched that game and I was thrilled. But I knew that wasn't John Gruden's team. That was Tony Dungy's team. But John Gruden does have the ability, and he does have the clout amongst players to motivate and build a team that can be a contender. Now let's look at these Rams. Los Angeles Rams made a late season statement against Arizona Cardinals with a dominant 34-7 victory. Stop right there. Stop right there. Let's be real for a second. Does anybody think that was really a statement that the Rams beat the shit out of the Arizona Cardinals? I don't think so. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. If they get into the postseason, they'll be out in the first week. Why? Because that team is just not – they're still hungover from that dismal performance against the New England Patriots. This is not a team that truly has ambitions of getting back into the Super Bowl. They don't. They know it, and anybody who knows football knows it. Los Angeles Rams are not a contender. They're not a contender. Offense clicked, and the defense harassed Kyle Murray throughout the contest. It's as good as the Rams have looked since last year's Super Bowl run. Well, let's do a little research here. Let's do a little research. Let's find Arizona's record right now. Let's see who they've played against. Arizona Cardinals, NFC West. Arizona Cardinals are 3-8. 3-8-1. Let's be real for a second here, folks. They got a rookie quarterback who can't do nothing. They got an offensive line that can't block. They don't have a receiving core. Larry Fitzgerald is hanging on just because he wants to try and help build Kyle Murray's confidence and help kind of shape his understanding of what good receivers should look like when they're running routes and when they're catching balls. And I love Larry Fitzgerald. Got all the respect in the world for this guy. He is an all-time great at the position of wide receiver. And with that being said, Larry Fitzgerald is there just to help the franchise. He's not there to be a game changer because that's not his role anymore. He's there to help the young guys come up and to build them up. But at the end of the day, when you look at this team, a team that has been blown out and they have been blown out in numerous games. You start the season with a tie against the Lions. You lose 38-20 to the Panthers. You lose 27-10 to the Seahawks. You lose 31-9 to the Saints. You lose 34-7 to the Rams, 36-26 to the Niners. You played close with the team, with the Buccaneers team that ain't nothing either. I mean, they got 3 wins that they walked out of the game won the game by the skin of their teeth, barely beating the Bengals, barely beating the Falcons, barely beating the Giants. This is not a team that you blow out and assume that you are making a statement. You're not making a statement. You should have blown them out. You should have blown them out by maybe 14 more points with the roster you guys have. So let's not get it twisted, and don't get your hopes up out there, Rams fans. I mean, let's be honest for 1 second here. They're just not the team that we assumed that they would be based on how they played last season. They're just not that team. Their defense has taken a bit of a jump because of the Jalen Ramsey trade. I'll give them that. I love Jalen Ramsey as a player. The guy is the kind of player I want on my team. Passionate player, physical player, and understands his value and goes out there and brings it for the most part every game. There was a little bit of lack of effort that I saw against that Baltimore offense, but hey, you're going to just throw your head in there when there's a pile of bodies rolling around 30 yards down the field? I wouldn't. And I'm a lineman. That's what we do. But I think when you look at a team like the Rams, I think they were a flash in the pan in terms of the level of play that they played at last year. Because when you look at it this year, it's just not the same. It's just not the same. Goff looks serviceable at best. I mean, you could have put in Gardner Minshew in that Rams offense against the Cardinals. He would have thrown 4 touchdowns. So what's your point? What is your point? This guy is not he's not that elite level quarterback that we thought he was. Hey, I thought he was. When I watched that game against Tampa, it changed my entire perspective on how the Rams are running behind Jared Goff. I just look at him and I say, that's just a lanky guy. Had a good season, had a good run. They caught fire in 2018. They caught fire, had a good run. And, a lot of guys made a lot of money based on that. But let's be real. They got exposed. That's what it boils down to. This team was exposed for the finesse, soft, breakable offense that they are. And that's what it is. And hey, I would take a look at a guy like Blake Bortles behind him now and see what we can do with him. Their situation would have to be a little bit more dire, but definitely something that, as a GM, I'd want to see, hey, how does Blake Bortles do in these situations? Blake Bortles led a team nearly to the Super Bowl. Well, I wouldn't say he led a team, but he was the quarterback, right? he threw the ball around there, Let's take a look at the chats. Kyle Murray overrated? Nah, I don't think it's possible to really call him overrated in his first year. I mean, listen, I remember my first year in the NFL, my rookie year, hell, any rookie coming into the NFL, you can look at their first year and say that they're overrated because we look like shit. We're not good. We just got here. We don't understand this game yet. But I do think, and Sith Lord Dento, I think he makes a good point here. I do think it's the coach. I think his coach is a little bit overrated. I think that these teams are falling in love with these young coaches. And they're looking at these young coaches and saying, this is the new wave. This is the new trend. Let's get these young coaches who are bringing in these overly complex schemes and these high-fiving, dapping, dabbing, hip to the game head coaches, and let's let these guys who have never really had experience in leading teams as coaches, let's let them have a say and let them lead the team. And because you get lucky and you make it to the Super Bowl and then proceed to embarrass yourself in said Super Bowl, that means that now this is the new wave to jump on in the NFL. How about you? If you're going to sign a young coach, I would assume I would prefer it be a young coach who actually has experience in football, a guy who's actually played in football. Because at the end of the day, there is something inherently more respectable about having a coach who has actually done it himself. I've always felt that way. You know, I'm not saying that it means they're going to be successful, but I mean inherently you automatically have a level of credibility with your players. They're already willing to buy into what you want to do when they know that you're a guy that's been out there on the gridiron, been out there and played games, been out there and struggled and been successful and fought through it the same way that you're asking them to do week in and week out. There's something that is just to be respected about that over what you see in today's NFL, where a lot of these new age coaches, these young guys who were just coordinators coming from here and there, and now all of a sudden you're putting them in the position to be a coach. And, you know, hey, like I say with the NFL, you can trick the NFL for only so long before the NFL catches up and exposes you. Happened with the Wildcat, happened with the read option. And, you know, hey, we're not going to talk about the Baltimore Ravens. That's a bit of an exception to the rule. Lamar Jackson is a freak, and that freakish ability that he has trumped the NFL's ability, or has trumped defense's ability to really put pressure on the unique style of read option. But that even is coming from a coach in Baltimore who's been there, coach who's been on the field, coach who's been out there on the gridiron pushing himself, and his players respect the hell out of him for it. But I digress. This trend of this new young hip head coach, it's a trend, and the NFL catches up to trends in 2 years, and he's on his second, and the NFL's catching up to him. NFL's catching up to him. I think that right now the Rams are just hanging on. I think they'll get in the postseason potentially. I think they're going to get. I think they should be able to get in, but at the same time, I don't expect the damn thing out of them once they get in there. I don't expect them to do much. They're 7-5. And the game and a half behind Minnesota, and Minnesota's playing Seattle on Sunday night. That's going to be a hell of a game, but that's going to be a game that's being played for that 6th seed in the playoffs, and that I believe is going to these two teams are going to be the teams that really end up pushing themselves into the postseason picture. But the Rams, I think, will be on the outside looking in when it's all said and done. Another great point here in the chat. Harbaugh is about as old school coach as you can get. His dad, Jack, wrote the book on old school. And, you know, again, like I said, he's a guy who has the respect of his players because he's been there. His pedigree is that of football. You know, his pedigree is that of football. And I don't think you can say the same about what's going on in Los Angeles with the Rams. I just don't think it's the same thing. Just don't think it's the same. You know? Sean McVay, young, trendy, sexy quarterback pick. Sexy head coach pick. I'm sorry. Jared Goff, another sexy pick. Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley, what the hell's happened to him this season? This guy looks like he's going through a bout of depression out there on the field. There's no energy coming from him at all. No energy. Just not a situation that I think he's happy with out there in LA, and I think that they may be looking to move him after this season. I would, and that's just my opinion looking at it from the outside, but you can look at the guy's body language and tell if he wants to be with the team or not. And I just haven't seen that much coming out of Todd Gurley. Just haven't seen it. Let's go to a couple of more comments here from the comment section, and then I'm going to go into a little bit more story time before we end this podcast, because I really want to talk about a few things I'll just kind of give you guys a little bit more about where I'm coming from when I talk about this stuff with football, because I've been there. It's December. This is the hunt for This is the hunt for the Red October. This is the hunt for that pass into the postseason, and many teams are battling it out for just a few spots. So after looking at some of these things, we'll go into some of that. Cade Eubanks, what do you think should happen with the Jags QB situation? This is what I talked about earlier in the podcast. Like I said, at the end of the day, I think Foles has got to be your guy because Foles is a better player. It's not Foles that's necessarily the issue. Fix that terrible, garbage-ass offensive line. Get some guys who can actually block, or get an offensive line coach that can teach them how to block better than they're doing right now. And I know Doug Marrone was the offensive line coach beforehand. I'm not so sure that he's the guy who's handling that now. But that offensive line is garbage. And that offensive line is the reason why Nick Foles is playing the way he plays. And again, I also think when you look at the front office, you look at Tom Coughlin. Tom Coughlin is a huge reason why the Jaguars are as bad as they are right now. If you're in Jacksonville, if you're in Duval, I love Duval. I was there my entire career. But let me tell you right now, don't get it twisted. Coughlin is not the answer. He's not the answer. Coughlin is a relic of an age past. They had to nearly break him in New York to get him to change his style. They had to nearly break him because he's not bigger than the New York Giants. He's not bigger than the New York Football Giants. He's just not. So he had to conform to more of a player's coach style mentality and how he dealt with the players on that team and how he operated that franchise. Coming back to Jacksonville, he knows that he has the Iron Throne there. He knows in Duval he can do what he wants because he has that clout, which means he just reverts back to everything that to all the things that he only knows. And that is that Bear Bryant style of grind you into the dirt, that old school, and again, we say old school and we talk about Jim Harbaugh and we talk about Harbaugh and what he's doing out there in Baltimore, but that guy is a player's coach. He is. He's a player's coach. He does things. He has old school elements to how he approaches things, but he's a player's coach. Those players love him. But Tom Coughlin, no, he's a different kind of old school. He is that stubborn, unmovable, completely stuck in his ways, old school that does not in any way wish to conform to modern, more casual trends within how football teams are managed. And that has done nothing but take away from everything that this Jaguars franchise had built up, coming out of the 2017 season. You've seen nothing but a steady decline. And when you have a steady decline from a team that was only 2 years ago one game away from being in the Super Bowl, that literally was that close to being in the Super Bowl, when you have that kind of decline following that season, when you lose your best player, I think that it says volumes about what he's really done to that franchise, because Jalen Ramsey, by all intents and purposes, had no desires to leave Jacksonville before Tom Coughlin. But Tom Coughlin and that's that old school stubbornness is what rubbed Jalen Ramsey the wrong way. Jalen Ramsey got into a little sideline spat with Doug Marrone, and things went all the hell. And things went all the hell. It all went to hell. It all went to hell, and I don't think that's because of Doug Marrone or Jalen Ramsey. I think it went to hell because Tom Coughlin decided, I'm not going to let this young punk come out here, scream at coaches. I'm going to tell him who he really is as soon as I see him. And I think that was, the straw that broke the camel's back with Jalen Ramsey in Jacksonville. I think you can attribute that almost completely to Tom Coughlin. And Tom Coughlin again, Tom Coughlin again has just, he's kind of got that Bill Parcells effect. You are a relic of an age that has long passed. This ain't the 80s, bro. This ain't the 90s. You're not going to come out there and just be the plantation master and have these guys breaking themselves because it's the only thing you know. There's a science to this shit now. There is a science to it. There is an etiquette that you have to kind of massage and nurture and able to get the kind of responses you want out of your team. In New York, like I see here in the comments, in New York, Sith Lord, you're dead on. You're dead on with it. Michael Strahan had a conversation with Tom Coughlin and told him, it ain't going to work like this, bro. You're not going to be that guy acting the way you're acting on this team in this city and think we're going to have any success. You need to chill. You need to chill. Strahan had that one-on-one. Something changed in Tomlin and how he operated, and you saw instantly a team win Super Bowls. But now he doesn't have to. There's no pressure. There's no player on that Jaguars roster that can step to Tom Coughlin in that building that he built as the first head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars with that allure of success that he brought to that team in the mid-90s. That is what he is riding on as he returns to this team after his time in New York. And he is without any opposing voice he is now that guy who can run it the way that he wanted to run it in New York all that time before Strahan came to him. And you see what dividends that's paying right now in Jacksonville. These guys are crashing and burning with at a speed that is unimaginable. I mean, 2017 seems like it was 10 years ago now. But at the end of the day, it's a league that there's such a small difference between the level of talent that each team has. The intangibles of a franchise have to be in place or you're not going to get anywhere. You have to have a standard. You have to have a level of efficiency. You have to have a level of respect and a level of relatability to your players, to your coaches, to your front office, to your trainers. From top to bottom, there has to be balance and there has to be a buy-in based on respect and based on the ability to lead and motivate. And when you don't have that, then you have teams like Cleveland. You have teams like Miami. You have teams like the Jets. You have teams like Jacksonville. Teams that don't seem to be headed in any direction in particular. Yeah, they may win. They may not go, they may not go winless on the entire season, but they're not really going anywhere. They're not really going anywhere. And I think that's what that's what we're seeing in Jacksonville. And at the end of the day, it's easy to put that on the quarterback's back. But how has that team been managed since they made that AFC Championship appearance in 2017? Not very well. All right, so to end this podcast, I'm going to go into a little story. I'm going to talk a little bit about a situation that I had as a player since it's December and the push for the playoffs has come. I'm going to talk a little bit about my 2010 year in Jacksonville, or 2000, what was that? 2007, 2008, 2009. 2009. Yeah, 2009 season in Jacksonville. I got asked by somebody a few days ago about how I felt as a player in a situation where you're playing to try and get into the playoffs. What does it mean to be playing for something in December? Because there are a lot of teams that aren't. A lot of teams that aren't playing for anything in December. And, it's hard to play the game of football when you don't feel like there's anything to really play for. Because at the end of the day, yeah, we're all getting paid good money, but something about it, that competitive nature just does not give a damn about that money when you're only playing for pride. And again, I think it kind of I kind of relate this back to the context that I spoke about earlier, where you have a lot of fans who have a coach who's historically provided success for your team, and they may have a couple of seasons where they stumble and they bumble, and then they don't necessarily perform. The team doesn't perform to necessarily the standard that one would expect, but sometimes you got to realize that you got something good, and you should be grateful for that as a fan, because it could be way worse. It could be way worse. And I look at a situation like I had in Jacksonville, 2010. This is the third year in a row that we're going into the last game of the football season with an opportunity to win and get in the postseason. And that's a win or lose, that's a beautiful position to be in. And funny enough, this game was played in Cleveland. Going into our last game of the season, we are going to Cleveland to play the Cleveland Browns, a team that at the time was the same Cleveland Browns that we all know and love today. A team with no direction, a team with little, if anything, in way of momentum, and we had to go into Cleveland and win this game to get into the playoffs. Now, I believe it was a scenario that had to play itself out in order for us to get in. It wasn't a crazy scenario. It wasn't, these guys win, these guys lose, these guys win, and this team ties or wins or loses. It was just, we needed Houston to lose, we needed Indy to lose, and we needed to win. I'm sorry. We needed Houston to lose, we needed Pittsburgh to lose, and we needed to win. We needed Indy to either win or tie, and we would get in. So we make the flight over to Cleveland, and the next morning, getting ready for the game, we're all in the stadium, and the temperature is -3 degrees. And this is my first time playing in Cleveland. And it is windy as hell when I come out of that tunnel for warm-ups. I had my arms caked with Vaseline. I was of the mentality, because, look, as an offensive lineman, and, again, a little bit softer when you look at these linemen these days, they're a little bit softer. Not as rough and tough as the guys that I came into the league with, and the guys that mentored me as a young player with the experience that they had. So there's that rule that used to be a rule for offensive linemen. Doesn't matter how cold it is, you do not wear sleeves. You don't wear sleeves. Offensive linemen don't wear sleeves in cold weather. You go out there with no sleeves on, you Vaseline those arms up, and you play ball, but you do not wear a mask, and you do not wear long sleeves, or you're considered a puss. That's what it is on the O-line. That's what it was this isn't that long ago, guys. This is 2010, but that's how much the league has changed. So I cake my arms up with Vaseline. I'm not even wearing a shirt under my jersey, under my pads. I'm wearing nothing under my pads just because I said, hey, I'm going to get warm out there from moving around, and I'm not wearing sleeves. And I don't want to feel like a Michelin man, with multiple shirts on, short sleeve shirts on under my pads. So I'm just going to wear my jersey, my shoulder pads, and I'll wear the long john pants under my pants so that I can keep my legs somewhat warm. My upper body will take care of itself. My legs, got to keep my legs a little bit warm. Go out there on the sideline. We start doing warm-ups, and I'm just like, this was a huge mistake. I'm out there in negative three degree weather with the winds howling. The winds made it feel like it was negative 13. Didn't realize that Cleveland Stadium was sitting on a river. That is some BS. That shouldn't be allowed in the NFL. But as I'm out there, as we're all out there, I mean, look, we're a team from Florida. You know what the weather was down in Jacksonville when we flew up to Cleveland? Weather was about 68 degrees. We left Jacksonville out of 68 degree weather. Nobody even had a coat on. All our coats were in our bags because it was still good weather down in sunny Jacksonville, Florida. So we get out here. We're on the sideline doing warm-ups, trying to make it look like I'm not freezing my ass off. After I get done with my part of the warm-up, snapping the ball, doing some snaps with the quarterbacks because I played at left guard, center, and right guard in my time in Jacksonville. I could start at any one of those positions, and I had at least one start at all of those positions at my time and during my time in Jacksonville. But I was, for all intents and purposes, the starting right guard and the swing guy on the entire interior of the offensive line. So get done with my snap, get done with doing snaps with the quarterbacks, and I'm just kind of chilling on the sideline in front of the biggest heater I've ever seen, feeling all right. Turn around, take a look at what's going on in the stands because this is pretty early before pregame warmups. You got to go out there with the quarterbacks. We go out there pretty early. I had to do that my first 4 or 5 years in the league, just because I was the only backup interior lineman as well as the starting interior lineman. So, standing out there in front of the heater, feeling good, got a nice blast of that jet engine heat smashing up against my back. Look to my left, look to my right. There's about 25 of us huddled up together. I mean, there's not even really anybody warming up right now. Everybody's kind of said, F that. We're going to stand in front of this heater and get warm because it's freezing. Turn around, look into the stands. All of the field staff, all of the guys who work the game are all standing in a line with their phones out, just recording us. Because this is a Florida team that has no idea what the hell we've gotten ourselves into. So let's move past warm-ups, and now we're going into the first drive of the game. Now, I didn't mention that at the beginning of this season, I had torn my meniscus. So I played the entire season with a torn meniscus. And I didn't realize until this game that the reason why my knee never got caught was because the weather was always relatively warm and there was always relatively good blood flow because of the weather that we played in Jacksonville. But as we started to jog out to the field, to get in the huddle, to start the game, I'm watching the ref blow the whistle for the clock to run. And halfway in between the sideline and the huddle, my knee locks in place at 90 degrees on my right leg. Locks in place. So I'm on one foot standing as the rest of the offense is getting in the huddle. I'm standing at about the numbers. I turn around and I look at the sideline and I am terrified because I'm like, my leg is stuck. I can't move. My knee is stuck at a 90-degree angle. And I don't know what to do because I don't think anybody notices it yet. I think I'm the only one that notices. So I do a double hop on one leg, and then I feel a little slight pop, and my knee comes unlocked. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. I'm good. Let me get my ass in the huddle. So I jog in there, and I'm late. And Dave Garrard looks at me like, "Oh, when you just, why you coming in this late? You were just with us." I don't say anything. He calls the play. We come out of the huddle. I turn around, coming out of the huddle, and my knee locks again. Walking to the line of scrimmage, my knee locked again. Utter terror at this moment. I'm ready to throw up right then and there on the field. I am sick at this moment. Totally sick. Because I'm like, wow, I'm about to call a timeout. Because there's no way I am going to line up with one leg and play this game. But, lo and behold, once again, as I took a small hop forward on one leg, my knee unbuckled or unlocked once again, and it came free. I got to the line of scrimmage. After the first couple of plays, the knee warmed up a little bit, and I didn't have another issue with it the rest of the game. But this was a game that we needed to win to get into the playoffs. And based on the conditions we played in, I can honestly say, and I think I can speak for that entire team, we didn't give a shit about getting into the playoffs that game. It was too cold. It was so cold that it didn't matter. You could hear every footstep on the turf. That's how cold it was. The ground was like literal cement. You just heard clickety, clackety, clickety, clackety from the cleats at the beginning of every play because there was no give on the ground. There was no give at all. Players from Cleveland, I remember distinctly me and the defensive tackle from Cleveland looking at each other and saying, "Hey, chill out. Don't hit my hands because this shit hurts." The push to the playoffs in December is a real push, but in our situation at the time, we didn't know that Houston was going to lose their game. We didn't know that Pittsburgh was going to lose their game. And we didn't know, well, we assumed that Indy would win, which they did. But the other two things that we needed to happen happened, and we found out right around the fourth quarter. We were down by 3 points. It was getting a little bit late in the game. But I really believe that at that time, when we found out that what we needed to happen happened, we, at that point, did not care. We were so cold. We were so utterly stuck in place because of the weather that we were only concerned about getting our asses back into the locker room, onto that plane, and flying our asses right back to Florida to the warmth and comfort of a city that was sitting around 70 degrees in the middle or at the end of December going into January. So while it is amazing to be playing for something at the end of the football season, there are also exceptions to that rule. We, as players, it just wasn't going to happen. I remember the flight back home. We looked at each other on the plane. Guys were laughing. Guys were having a good old time. We had some bottles of liquor in the back that we had stashed away with the flight crew so we could get a hold on that once the game was over. Guys were making their plans to fly to Vegas the very next day. There was no hard feelings about that. I think we were all on the same page in that we just wanted this season to be done with. It was a hard season, and we were in a position to make something happen. Now, had we known going into the game that everything that we needed to happen would happen, I think we would have approached it a bit different. I think we would have went after that win as hard as we could But at that point, going into that game, it was a slim to none chance, and it just so happened that happened, that the scenario played out the way it did. But at that point, we didn't care. We're all professionals. We're all men. We knew that going into that game, we weren't going to the playoffs. And for you to wait till the fourth quarter to tell us, hey, everything we need to happen is happening. No, it's too late. Our minds have been made up. We're going home, and I'm going to Vegas on Monday. So let's get this over with. And that's just how it played out. Now, some might look at that and say, hey, you guys should be playing to win every week. Hey, let me tell you something right now. You think the Miami Dolphins are playing to win every week? You think those Cincinnati Bengals are playing to win every week? Nah, they gave up on that 6 weeks ago. They're playing to finish. They're trying to finish the season. That's why you don't see guys laying out. That's why you don't see guys sacrificing their body when you're an 0-11 team, because there's no reason to sacrifice your body. And at that point for us, we felt like there wasn't any reason for us to sacrifice for that game. We pulled the game to a 3-point game. We lost by 3 points. We actually almost had a chance to win it late. Clock management was bad by our offensive coordinator. So we ended up, turning the ball over on fourth down inside the 10-yard line, or else we might have been in the playoffs that year. But it was a business decision. The chances of us getting into the playoffs are slim to none. So the mentality that we come into this game with is that we're ready to end this thing. It's vacation time, boys. And that's how we played it for the most part. Now, were we trying to win? Sure. But it wasn't there wasn't any heightened urgency to win if it didn't work out. Just wasn't there. So we played the game the way we played it. Sure enough, I flew my ass out to Las Vegas about 2 or 3 days later. Had a great old time. Said, hey, see you guys in March. Start getting ready for it then. But that's my story time. Reminiscing about those old days in Jacksonville. But I'd just like to say I appreciate everybody who's been on the stream. Follow me on Twitter. My Twitter is CHUKWU77, Chukwu77. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you smash that melee button. And make sure you check me out, as this podcast will be re-aired on primetimesportstalk.com. Big shout out to Sam Gordon and those guys out there at Primetime Sports Talk. Really enjoying the situation that I have with those guys. But look, there's going to be tons of more stories that I'm going to give you guys in my podcast. I drop my videos on my channel, on my YouTube channel, to kind of give you my reaction to the headlines of the day. But these podcasts are a different beast. These podcasts are me giving you my true insight as a player and giving you my stories and my experiences as a player. It's just kind of give you kind of a window into the actual thoughts of what players really think. There's a lot of the politically correct things that you'll hear about football and how it's supposed to be played. But then there's also a reality about how it is played and how it is viewed and how it is handled by players. And I think that, giving you guys a little bit of a window into that perspective is very important, because, sometimes we're humans. We're guys that really look at the world. We're guys that really look at the football world from a human perspective. I mean, it's not always about things the way that we've learned it to be coming up as fans. Once you're a player and you get into that position where you actually see how some things are handled, it is very much different than what fans perceive it to be. And it's not to say that fans are ignorant of it, but definitely is not always as it seems, as I've just given you some insight with this story regarding Cleveland. Now, I've got other stories. Like I said, I think y'all are going to enjoy them quite mightily. But definitely is something that I will continue to evolve my podcast with in the future. Let's take a couple of these chats before we end this thing off here. JC's Adventures 89. Who was the player that did the 3 claps and a Ric Flair? And the hype video played on the Jumbotron. Oh, you talking about Jacksonville? Shoot, man, I don't know. I've been to one Jacksonville game since I retired from football. I have no idea. But he gave you that 3 clap. Woo! That Ric Flair. Hey, maybe. I don't know who it is though. But let's take a look here. I'm gonna go through real quick and just take a look at what some of you guys look at this. Jags have a QB battle. No, I don't think it should be a battle, Zach. I really don't. I don't think it should be. But yeah, right here. Sneak a Pikachu. You know exactly what it is. Business decisions. Business decisions are made every day in the NFL, both on and off the field. And for us in Cleveland, that was a business decision. It's time to go on vacay. It's not like that game check is going to be any bigger than what you're making this week anyways. Hell, that playoff check is actually a pay cut for most players. Shoot, I was making about $125,000 a week. Why would I want to lay out in this -3 weather to get the chance to play in one playoff game that's going to net me about what, 20,000 as far as the playoff check goes? Playoff checks ain't nothing. Who wants that? See here. Lawan Health, who was the hardest player to block? You know what? That's a story. That's a story for another time. I'm going to answer that in my next podcast. Now, what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try and make these podcasts a daily thing. It's not going to run this long. We're at what, an hour 46. I'm going to try and keep the podcast around an hour. So make sure that you check your notifications. Check and make sure that you have that bell notification ticked on my channel. That way you can get notified because I will be dropping the reminder for my podcast generally an hour or so before it starts. So make sure you guys are ready for that. But really appreciate everybody being on the podcast today. Like I said, make sure you check out primetimesportstalk.com. I'm also working with those guys, and they'll be re-airing my podcast, the audio part of it, later today. But again, appreciate everybody being part of the podcast. This has been Lineman Life, Uche Nwaneri's Lineman Life podcast. I will catch you guys on the next one. Have a wonderful Monday, and let's be great. See you guys soon. Peace.